All right, so very welcome everyone. I'm very happy to see so many people here. And yeah, so welcome to this collaboration webinar between Motio and NodeGraph. And before we start the actual discussion today, I'm very briefly going to go through what you all can expect from this session. So my name is Julia and I'm the Partner Marketing Manager at NodeGraph. And I'm here today with my colleague Oscar Falvik, who's the Managing Director at NodeGraph Inc., and also with Edwin van Meijesen, who's the VP Business Development at Motio. And we are so excited to welcome you today. So this webinar is, as you might know, going to cover both version control and data impact analysis through data lineage and how we can combine these two for an even better experience and more reliable results. We are going to learn a bit more about Motio and about NodeGraph, and we are going to cover why to enrich your environment with version control and what data lineage is and how to determine the impact of changes. We're also going to hear a discussion about the key aspects of a mature Qlik implementation. So along with the session today, we are going to ask you a few poll questions along the line, and we really appreciate your answers. And also, of course, if you want answers on your questions, please go ahead and ask them during the session. On your left-hand side, you can find a tab called Questions, and you can write all your questions there. And we will have some time in the end of today to answer your questions. And if we would run out of time, we make sure to contact all of you to actually make sure that you get your answers. So please just go ahead and ask everything that you would like to know. So I thought we'd just go ahead and start with the first two poll questions. So do you currently work with data lineage in your Qlik environment? We're getting some answers here. There are a few who does and some who doesn't. And while you're answering that one, I'm actually going to ask the second question as well. So do you use version control in your Qlik Sense environment? So you can find these questions during the poll under the polls tab on your left-hand side, and so you can go ahead and answer during the session as well. It's very interesting to see your results. I'm gonna show the results. It's very even here actually. You can see there is basically we have a very different answers. Interesting. All right. So thank you so much for that. And I think we're just gonna get starting. So I will hand over to Edwin, who will talk you through version control and what Motio can do to help you with that. So welcome up on the stage, Edwin.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Edwin.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Thank you, Julia, for the introduction and to introduce Motio to everybody on the call who doesn't know us. We are here located in Dallas, Texas, US, and everything that Motio does is building software products to solve problems that people have in BI platforms, and focusing on streamlining and automating the whole BI development process. We are doing that for a very long time for IBM Cognos, and since 2018 we also support Qlik Sense. And since Qlik Sense is used all over the globe, we of course do sales directly, but also we have a whole partner network that supports our customer in every major economy. And if people start implementing Qlik, what we see is that end users and power users really start to like the product, and they like the sheets, and they like the dashboard and the ease of use and the way it's presented. So people want more and more of these applications and dashboards. And what we see is that the strategy of Click that they would call land and expand is really working for them. And if you want to know more about the people behind that, the luminaries, we have a whole luminary live series on our website where you can see why they choose for Click, what they like, and what they are doing. But if we see and if we look at this architecture of Click, it can get bigger and bigger over time because of the success of the implementation. And the data flows and the BI architecture can get very complex. And we can have apps that extract data from cloud or databases or other files and load it into QVD files, transform data, and before it actually ends up in the app that people are actually using, there's a whole flow and an ETL layer that has been implemented. Now, that can be very complex. And with that complexity, the number of issues can rise when you make changes to the platform. And that could endanger the success of Click again. And we, of course, don't want that to happen. What you can face is that you have inefficiencies in the development process. You could see that people want to have source control available, and what they start doing is copying apps around or making their own copies and have multiple versions. Also, if you have like a dev and prod environment, it could be very cumbersome to deploy from one environment to the other and keep track on those changes. And of course, there is no safety net. If you make mistakes, if you delete something and you find out a few weeks later, then how do you repair that? And how do you know what happened? Well, since this Click implementation are very successful, people also start having applications that face outside users. It could be vendors, it could be customers. And in that case, we see demands from auditors to say, hey, this is an application that's external facing. I want to make sure that it works fine. I want to audit this solution. And then certainly we want to know who changed what, when, why, with what impact over time. And if you have that in place, then you can see that you get more trust in your environment. And that's what we bring to the table here. Zero-touch version control to also create efficiency in your development process. What Soter will offer you is that there's a seamless integration between ClickSense and our application, and everything is happening through the background. So there's no additional shell on top of ClickSense. You don't have to do any additional steps to make this happen. It will just version automatically. And we will do that in a very granular level. We will version every individual object and track the changes that are made by individuals in the organization. And then, of course, we want to have analytics as well, because we preach analytics to the business people. We say, hey, you have to make your decisions on data and on analytics, but we also should have that on our own activities. And that's what we provide. We'll provide the option to report over your own development process in ClickSense. Well, what does that look like? Let me show you that and share you the application. All right. So I'm here in my ClickSense application. And as you can see, I have multiple streams here on the left. I got a discovery screen, I got a data analysis screen, and I got multiple apps. And if I would open this app, you will see that it is a very regular app, and it has multiple sheets. It got some bookmarks, and also it got a story. So nothing special about this app. So let's see, and let's make some changes to this app. So what I'm going to do is going to duplicate it, and I will bring it to my own personal workspace. So let's go to this workspace. Here is my app, and let's make the 3 classic changes that you would normally make in an application. I am going to delete something, I'm going to add something, and I'm going to change something. So first, I'm going to delete this sheet. And then what I'm going to do is going to open up this, this sheet. And what I want to do is I want to make some changes. So I make a selection here and I will add a bookmark. Create a bookmark here. So I'm going to do webinar bookmark here. Create that and save it. As you can see, I got my bookmark here and I want to make a change at the same time. So let me go to the data load editor. There are some duplicates code here, what I'm going to delete. And then if I have done that, we'll take a look on how that is shown in Soter and how that is going to be picked up. So select that, save that. We'll reload the data here. All right. So I make my changes and I'm going to leave this app. And what I'm going to do now is publish the app again. So basically what you have seen is that what I'm doing is nothing different than you would normally do. And the app is now here. And if I would open the app, you will see that the sheet is gone and that my bookmark is there. So regular activities, what a developer would do when they work in apps, if they make changes to it, when they publish it again. And here you can see, and my bookmark is here as well. Okay. So how is this being picked up by Soter? So I am now in Soter, and as you can see, I have my multiple environments here. I have a dev environment and a test environment. And if I would scroll, you could see that I have my personal workspace here. I got my several streams here. I got my data connections, and these are all under version control. But now I'm going to focus on how these changes have been made. And I could go to the timeline to see what has happened over time. And these three changes are being picked up automatically. And if I want to know, hey, what happened here in this app, I could look at the change history and I could see that something has been changed in this app. And if I want to compare this with the previous version, I could do that. I could look at the properties, nothing changed there, but the script has been changed. So I can see what has been added, what has been removed in the load script. And before deploying that to my production environment or moving an app from a development stream to a production stream, I can assess this and see what has happened. Is this a change that I wanted to happen? If I would make a mistake and I say, hey, this regional fleet sheet that has been deleted, but that was not intentional, that was a mistake, and I find it out a few weeks later, a lot of changes could have been made. So again, it's very easy to repair that. I could go in here, I could say restore, I hit finish, and what Soter will do will bring back that sheet. All right. And the good thing is that you want to have an indication why this happened. So if you want, you can make a comment here, delete it by accident. I can say that this is based on a Jira ticket and that there's a specific ticket number here available. And now I have a comment here as well that we understand why this change was made and what happened here. Okay. Now let's go back to ClickSense. I'm here in my app. If I would open my app, oh, 1 second, I have to change here. I would open my app. Then my fleet, regional fleet sheet is back, but at the same time, my bookmark is still there and my load process has been adjusted. So this is a short impression of how version control works and how it doesn't impact the way of working of your power users and your developer. So the implementation is very seamless. Okay, now let's go back to my slide deck. Okay, now, so I was talking about this whole flow of data through your BI architecture and through your different Qlik environment. Now, let's imagine that Soter identifies a certain change in the load process. In this case, we have a British company that uses the term turnover, and they are on an accrual basis. But this changes because they are acquired by an American company that uses the term revenue, and they are on a cash-based accounting system. So what happens here is that we see a change in the load process where a certain field is being renamed to sales, and this is particularly impacting on the extraction app. But further on in the whole chain, there's no impact, right? We don't see which apps are impacted. We don't see which users are impacted. But we want to know that because we might want to communicate this. We might want to test something out and make sure that the data is still correct. So what Soter will do is it will help you to identify the change and make sure that you understand what the change is and if the change is correct. And from there on, you have additional questions. So key aspect of a mature Qlik implementation is version control to identify any change that is being made to the whole setup, that you can comply to audit requirements and answer questions. Why did it change? Who changed this? When changed this? But also that you have analytics, Qlik over Qlik, or business intelligence over business intelligence. But then if you want to know the impact of this change, you need lineage. You need to understand this field that used to be turnover, now is called revenue, which is sales in Qlik. Where is that used? In which sheets? In what applications? What users are having this? So I need to know that. And from there on, I want to hand over to Oscar to talk more about lineage.
Thank you so much, Edwin, for a great presentation and for that handover and intro. Let's see if I can...
yeah, let me make your...
can you make me a presenter and I will...
yeah.
Thank you so much. So can you see my screen now?
Not yet.
Not yet.
There we go.
Now you can see it. See it now?
Yeah, I can see it.
Perfect. So thanks once again. Thank you so much, Edwin. And as Julia stated, my name is Oscar Falvik, and I'm the Managing Director for our operations in Americas, so for NodeGraph Inc. I'm going to start with just a short intro to NodeGraph. NodeGraph is a Swedish-based data intelligence company focusing on data lineage, metadata, and analytics governance. And we're going to go further into that later on in this presentation. We are based in Gothenburg, Sweden. We're currently serving about 160 plus customers in 25 countries worldwide. We have 60 plus partners, and we are also global partners with companies like Microsoft, Tableau, Qlik, and Snowflake. So what is it NodeGraph then do? What is it that we add to the table? Yeah, we talk about this analytics governance. And what is analytics governance? It's very much, as Edwin says, to understand what is really happening inside your BI solution. Meaning when the data leave, even in either if they leave from a data management solution or directly from the source system, you want to understand how is this data really consumed. In the BI tool, you will see some really nice visualizations. You will be able to look at different graphs and KPIs and so on. But what happens behind that, and what NodeGraph will show you is all the way from the source system out to the specific content in your BI tool, what happens with the data, what kind of transformations are done on the way, in which applications, on what sheets, in which KPI does this end up in, but also what kind of data is used. I mean, you can actually follow through from the data source which fields and tables are we actually reading data from, and how are they flowing through my BI solution all the way out to the BI user. And what is important with that is, of course, really to build a trust and understanding around what is it that I'm really looking at. this specific KPI that I have in my application, where does it really come from? How is it built up? What fields are used? From which source system? What transformations are done? And the other side of that is then, of course, also to understand if I change something somewhere in this process, what kind of impact will that have? What kind of dependencies do I have? So yeah, we talked about full field level data lineage, and that of course also very important in doing this, that you need to track this all the way down on the lowest level, down on the field level, to understand how this ties together. We have the impact analysis. What if I change something here? What effect will that have? You can see all your dependencies in your BI solution. It's 100% automated. We believe that these things need to be automated, because it's not automated, you're going to have some manual work, and then you will lose the trust in the process. We're showing all BI tool content, and what I mean with that is that in the data lineage that you see in NodeGraph, it's not only about table and fields and how that flows into your BI solution, but it's also a little bit like Edwin was into earlier. It also shows the actual content of, which applications do we have, and how is this applications built up? Which sheets, and on the different sheets, what kind of objects, content are you using, meaning graphs, expressions, and so on. So you will understand both how the table field lineage look like, but also understand how the applications are built up and what kind of applications do I have. You also have a glossary where you can search among your metadata. I will show that shortly. And it's built on a graph database. And the main upside of this is that you can visualize the lineage in a very easy way for you to consume and understand. Yeah, very shortly, we talked about analytics governance. I just want to state once again that, with NodeGraph, you can actually understand and see how your data is consumed in the BI solution. Should it be Qlik, Power BI, Tableau? But what happens with the data when it leaves the data source and between it leaves the data source until it's consumed by the BI user? And that's also to understand. It's first when you understand that and have that insight that you can also get to the level that you can if I do a change, what will happen, and so on. How is this tying into the total landscape? This is the supported tools. We covered that already. Qlik, Power BI, SQL Server, Tableau, Snowflake. We also have Oracle to add to this picture today. So let's have a look on how this looks like. I will open NodeGraph for you. Sorry. Hopefully you can see NodeGraph now. So this is the start screen of NodeGraph. So what NodeGraph does is that we automatically read out all metadata information from Qlik Sense or Qlik View. And we do this by using the APIs, log files, and so on to really get all the insights, all the information about how your BI applications are built up. In the product called Data Atlas, we are focusing on the data lineage, the metadata. In this product, we have two main components. We have something called Data Catalog, and we have the Dependency Explorer. So let us start with the Dependency Explorer. So what you see here is that you have a flow, a data lineage flow, that in the left side you have your data sources, your databases. In this example, we use the AdventureWorks database. Then for the Qlik structure, you have the extract layer, you have your transformation layer, and then you have the application and the content. And what this means is that in the right side, if I go in, expand the Qlik content, you will see that I have my master objects, I have my sheets, I have my variables. I can dig deeper down to my sales dashboard. That was the only sheet in this application. I can see that I have some bar charts, a bar chart called sales per year, and this is built up by this dimension, and then I have this expression. So what if I then choose this expression. What you can see now is, if you take hide unrelated node on current view, what you will see now is that now NodeGraph will show for me what kind of dependencies does this expression have going backwards through my click solution. So I can go back to the application. I can see that the sales total is picking up fields from this click view table. I can take hide unrelated node again, and you will see that this expression is picking up 3 different fields from the sales order detail. I can go back to the transformation layer, and I can see that these 3 fields come from a QVD file called fact sales order detail. And it's actually these different fields that in their turn come from another QVD file in my extract layer. And then I can go all the way back into my to my data source to understand. And by this, I get the full understanding how this KPI that I'm looking on in my application is built up. Also, of course, meaning going back to your version control and so on, what will be the impact of if I do a change in this flow? How will it impact my applications? Which application will it impact and so on? In this example, I only have one application, but you surely understand how it would look like. One way to visualize that is that I can instead pick this field here. And if I take this field, I take hide unrelated nodes, you will see what dependencies this field has in my application. I can also go into specific field, choose explore field, and I will get the full click syntax about how this field is built up, meaning I have the full transformation insight to what has happened with this field in my BI when I built my application, when I find my QVD file, and so on. And by that, I can also understand exactly what it is that I'm looking on. So
this looks amazing, Oscar. And I think if we go back to the example that I gave, that I changed something in my source system, in where we say, hey, we connect in our database table to another field, and that is only changed in the extract layer. So even before you make the change, you could see, hey, if I make this change, what is going to be the impact, and which transform and which applications are being impacted, so that I can plan my testing accordingly. I can talk with my end users and power users accordingly, because I know what is going to be impacted, correct?
Exactly. So I mean, on any point in this flow, you can go in and pick a field, pick a table, and understand what will be the impact if I do a change in this. You can also do it, of course, in the going back to the source. What if I do a change already before it leaves for click? On the other end, I can also, I mean, in this example was quite narrow, but out of a self-service perspective, I can also understand and see what kind of applications are defined in my BI environment, because it might just as well be that you don't really know what kind of applications are out there. So going back to your example, Edwin, what we also can do here, if I go back here, I go into our data catalog, what I can do here is I had this sales total expression that was used in this application. So I go in here, I search for sales total. I get everything related to this. I can see that I have an expression here called sales total. If I pick that, I will get some more information about this expression. And what I will see here is I will see in which application is this used in. Do I have a limit covered? I can see the definition of these KPIs. I get the full syntax. And I can also put in some ratings, some more business description and so on. So this is a very easy way, if you plan in your click deployment, doing a version change, if you want to do a change in a KPI, you can go very easily, go first into this data catalog, search for this KPI, and then you will get the full insight, where is this KPI used? Meaning in which applications, on which sheets, in which objects in my BI application is this expression used, meaning you will have the full insight on what impact a change in this will have on your solution, meaning also when you've done the change, you can come back here, you go into all these applications, and you can verify that this KPI is still the same, it still shows the result that you expect.
Excellent.
All right, I think that was everything from my side. So let us go back to, and let me go back and hand over the presentation to Julia, or is it to you, Edwin?
No, I think that's for me actually. And just to make sure that you haven't fallen asleep yet, I think it's time for poll question number 3. So let's start here. Okay, so how do you determine the impact of the changes you make? So please go ahead and answer the 3rd poll question. Awesome, we already have some answers here. And also remember that we will answer all of your questions in the end. So if you have your own questions, don't hesitate to use the questions tab on your left-hand side. We're really excited to see what kind of questions you have to us, to Edwin or to Oscar to answer. And just as before, you can keep on answering the poll questions afterwards. Cool. So right now we actually have a bit of a discussion here between Edwin and Oscar. So I do have some questions for Edwin and for Oscar to answer. So the first one is, so when we've heard this, it's really interesting to hear how both Motio and Zotero works, but how do you keep control over and track the impact of the changes that you make in your Qlik environment?
I think that's a really good question, Julia, and I think it goes back to what we discussed before. I mean, one way is of course to, in your data lineage, first before you do the change, go in and understand how is your BI environment built up? What kind of dependencies do I have? What if I change a field in a specific QVD file, or if I do a change in this specific expression, what kind of impact will it have on my BI environment? Meaning, where is this expression used, or where is this field used? Where does it come from, and so on. And by doing that, you can do this in a very controlled and structured way.
Yeah, and at the same time, I think that sometimes changes happen that you don't expect, right? Especially when you have power users and power users that build their own apps, or power users that make community sheets or other sheets. You see changes being made that you might not expect. So I always say having power users is like letting your 6-year-old or 5-year-old child learn to ride a bicycle, right? And as a father, you run behind your child and you don't let them fall. You don't give them a push and say, good luck, right, the first time. So if you have power users, you want to know what are they doing, which measures are they using, how are they building that up. So you want to see the changes and the changes that they make to the applications. But at the same time, you want to know, okay, did they use the right fields? Are they consistent across apps? And that's when you want to use this lineage again. So I think it works very nicely together, both in planned changes by the development team, but also by things that our power users are using to make sure that you know what's going on in their world.
That's very interesting. So do you know in what applications and where the different content parts are used?
Yes, Julia. I think going back once again, I mean, and yes, I also want to elaborate on what Edwin said, because I think the combination of version control, where you actually can do changes in a very structured way, you can ensure that they are implemented and deployed in a secure way, and you can control that process, and at the same time have a good data lineage solution on field level, where you actually can understand how this ties together. And as you state, going back once again, understand where is this really used and also meaning that don't not only have a data lineage metadata solution that is focusing on table and fields, but also focusing on visualizing the content. Because meaning as Edwin said, that we don't always know what will happen and how things are changing and what things has been done. And a typical click environment can be very agile. So by having these two instruments, you can follow up and understand what has been added, not only in context of sheets and expression, but also in applications. Because it might be that suddenly there is a new application that pops up that you wasn't aware of. And by then combining the lineage and the NodeGraph functionality to understand these apps has been added so that they can be also included in the version control process and so on, then you get a very, I think, well-governed environment.
Yeah, and one of the things is, and I think one of the attendees asked this, is do you version external files as well? And of course, we see that people have Excel files and they have maybe files with variables that they push along. We have that for our Cognos solution, so we know how to do that. But the only thing is that we haven't had the time to add that to Soter, but it is on the roadmap to make sure that if you use certain metadata files in Excel or other files, that you can version those, put them on the version control, but also push them along when you do deployment. So that is being planned. So yes.
Yeah, and I can just add to that, Edwin, because I see there are two questions here. And one is that in NodeGraph, you will, of course, also be able to see all the Excel files that you read. So when all sources that you read data from into your Click solutions will be visible in the lineage. So you will also have control over what other sources are you using. And that could be in the other way, be a way to see that, hey, here someone is using an Excel file that we wasn't expecting them to do. That also could be important. The other thing is, I see that someone is asking about non-click sources like SSIS, and yes, NodeGraph can we have a connector for SQL Server with SSIS and SSRS that you automatically can read lineage from those sources too.
Very good.
Yeah, I think we do have time for one more of these discussion questions. And what dependency do you have to the part where you want to change, and what would the impact be if you do a change?
Perhaps I will let you Edwin, start answering that.
Yeah. So what I think, which is very important, is that is that we have multiple apps, and sometimes you have smaller implementations, right, where they go to a direct connection, and there is not an extract layer or transform layer. So it's more an easy implementation, right? But still, you want to know what changes are being made and what the impact is, because even if you have a very straightforward Click implementation with only a few people that are working on that, it still makes sense to have lineage and version control, because you might still have 10 apps or 15 apps. Although you don't have a very deep layer, you will share measures across these applications. So you still want to know, hey, in this example, and still want to make sure that this app is using this sales total, but that's also used in other apps. So seeing the dependency in a smaller environment, seeing that you make changes in one app that may be deployed to another app is very important. I also have seen people that use like a template, and especially when they have a template that they push out to different divisions, but it is the same app, but it goes to different data sources or to local installs. Then you want to make sure that I apply the change in every single app, although they are alike and based on a template. So from my perspective, it doesn't really matter if it's a smaller environment with a deep layer, or if it's a more flat environment, but also if you have like a dev QA prod stack, you want to know what's going on in these stacks, right? And you want to make sure that if I make a change in in your dev environment, that you can deploy it to your QA environment, and that you can deploy it to your production environment and have version control in each of these environments, so you can see that a certain change has been brought to all environments. And that's answering one of the questions in the chat right now.
Yeah, and I got also a very good point, Edwin. I think one last thing I can also just add is that I think the combination of lineage and version control, even very early in the Qlik journey, I think is a very good way to secure that you will scale your solution in a controlled way, and you will avoid a situation where you have a mismatch and where you don't really know what kind of information you're showing the end users. I mean, we've seen a lot of examples, for instance, where a little bit larger organization perhaps, but they are not really on control what kind of KPI they have in the hands of the business user and the definition of these KPIs.
Absolutely. So and that's often in the beginning of the implementation. If you start with QlikSense, you have the overview, right? There are only a few apps. There's not that much development going on. You're guiding your end users with training. And when you have this discussion with them, they say, no, I oversee everything. It's very clear. But then after a while, because of the success of Qlik and that people, end users, really like it, then certainly you hit that turning point where it becomes too complex. And then people ask changes in an earlier version of an app. And now you have your maintenance, your new development, your changes running in parallel. So you have to get releases out. So you have to go to a more structural implementation. Otherwise, you run into problems that I mentioned at the start. So I agree, Oscar. If I'm a product manager and I've done several BI projects myself, structure, organizing it well, having insight of what's going on, having insight of what the team is doing, what the BI team is doing, what the maintenance team is doing, what the developers are doing, power users are doing, is essential to keep up with the whole the environment and make sure you don't run into problems, because then you will go down because of your own success.
Thank you so much for that. It's really interesting hearing your discussion here. I thought, Oscar and Edwin, if you could please summarize how Motio and NodeGraph can work together. I know that, Edwin, that you have prepared a couple of points, so I will transfer the session to you so you can show what is the biggest key takeaways from this session.
Absolutely. Let me accept this. Let me share my screen here. So what is the power of the combination? And how I see it is that if you have version control and lineage in place, it helps you to communicate more effectively with your end users, because you have the insight, you know what's changing. If you want to communicate about a certain release, if you want to communicate what has been changed, you have the overview and you see what the impact is of changes and releases that you're making. Also, when end users come back to you and they say, hey, what happened here? Or, hey, there's something new here, right? And that might have been done like a month ago. You have that immediately. So it also shows that you are on top of things and you know what you are doing. So effective communication is essential to have to build trust at end users that you have control over the environment. Well, secondly, of course, very important, if we make changes, we need to test, right? We need to make sure that the change doesn't lead to any problems in the data. And I don't mean that an app wouldn't load. I mean that there is some mistake and that data is incorrect, although the app still loads correctly, right? So you want to determine the scope to say, okay, these apps have to be tested, or end users, these sheets you have to take a look at because there is a major change in the whole layer of collecting data and providing data, and you are using these measures. And then last, very important, you will get questions, and that might be from auditors, but it might also be from managers. And basically they ask, how are you doing your work? Do you have control over your work? Do you know what you are doing? So having these answers quickly available really helps. And When I worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers, we did a lot of audits, quality audits in the 9001 series, and we would go to people and say, show me this, show me that. I read here in the procedure that you're working this way. Show me, prove me, right? And there were so many different people that had it all organized and could say, of course, here it is. Let me show you. Let me give you this report. And other people go like, oh man, I don't know. That's very hard. And quality of work and having an process in place that's very structured is essential to deliver the most accurate and reliable BI implementation possible.
All right. So how will NodeGraph help you with achieving this? I mean, one obvious thing is that you will understand the impact of the change you are doing. Meaning, what if I do a change here? Well, how will it impact my click environment? And I think that's really important to have this insight, to understand what's really happening behind the scenes. How is everything this tied together? And where am I using this information? And if I do a change, how will that information be impacted in any way? It's also about track and trace where the data comes from and where it is used. I mean, once again, understand and control your BI environment, because if you can do that, you're also on top of things when you do changes in the environment. And also it will be more secure, and you will be able to scale with quality, and not the least, it will help you to build a trust among your BI users for their applications, for the information that they are looking on, for the data. That will also help you become even more data-driven. And last but not least, it will also help you to increase the speed of and trust in the development and deployment process. So when you do change and when you scale, when you add new things, when you add new applications, you add new content in your applications, you will be able to do this in a much more structured and time-efficient way if you have this if you have the help of version control and data lineage to fully understand how things are tied together and how things will be affected if you do changes and so on. Yes?
Excellent.
Wow, yeah, cool. I can really see lots of benefits for all kinds of organizations. And before we see if we have any questions that we haven't touched on yet, I have one last poll question to our audience. So if you combine version control and data lineage, would that be powerful to you? We do have some answers here. It looks pretty good. I think people are really have got the full picture of this. So 100% so far says it would be powerful indeed. I'm very happy to see that. Cool.
All right. Well, thanks so much everybody for joining.
Thank you so much.